What's up guys, I'm back with another video. I know it's a little on the late side, but things haven't gone exactly to plan lately. So today I'm going to show you how I set up a new enclosure for a new animal that I'm getting here at Gecko Galaxy. Alright guys, as I said in the intro, I'm going to be showing you how I'm going to set up a new enclosure for a new animal for here at Gecko Galaxy. I'm not going to tell you what this animal is. I'm going to keep it a surprise. We're going to be doing an unboxing video when it finally comes in. I'm currently working with the seller on finding a good ship date. We're waiting for better weather, basically. So if you guys want to take a crack at what I'm getting based on what you see in this video, please comment down below. I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. So if you watched my very first video, you'll know that I use tubs to keep most of my New Caledonian geckos in currently. So I use plastic storage bins that I buy from various places, Walmart, Target, Home Depot. You can get them anywhere. I used appropriately sized bins, and most of my geckos stay on a paper towel substrate, and they're loaded with a lot of artificial decorations to make sure they have plenty of places to climb and plenty of places to hide and feel secure. So that is what I'm going to be doing today, is showing you how I set up a brand new tub for a brand new animal. So I'm going to take you through all of the materials that I have and how I get them ready to turn them into an enclosure. Now let me preface this video with saying that this is not by any means the only way or the absolute right way to set up these types of animals. This is just the way I do it. It's the way a lot of other people do it as well, who are working with a little bit larger volume of animals and who are limited on space. There's obviously lots of options available. Converted vertical tanks or glass terrariums with front opening doors. They're extremely nice, and you can take it as far as you want and go as naturalistic with it as you want and have bioactive enclosures, which some of my tubs are set up bioactively, as you might know. But you need to realize that this is just the way I do it, and I'm just trying to show you a viable option for how you can set these animals up and the way that it works for me, and it does work very well. But to each his own. Everybody's going to have their own way of doing things, and I'm sure that as I grow and evolve in this part of the hobby, that I'm going to move a little bit more towards that part of it as well once I have the space available. Alright, so I'm going to start by showing you some of the materials that I have here. And a couple of the most important things that you're going to want to have are obviously the tub, the plastic storage bin, and you want to make sure that it's appropriately sized. I use a variety of these bins for my animals here at Gecko Galaxy, and they need to be appropriately sized for whatever animal you're trying to put in them. So for this particular setup, I have a rather large bin right here. This is a Sterilite container, as you can see right there. It's a 95 quart Sterilite container. It is rather large. And I gotta be honest with you, the first time I used one of these particular bins, I wasn't extremely excited about this strange shape in the front. I was just kind of like, man, I really like them to be square. But I have used one of these in the past, and I sort of gave it a chance, and it works really well. So you can see it's got a nice locking lid, holds on there nice and tight. So when this lid is on there, your gecko or whatever else you're gonna be putting in there is not gonna be able to escape. But this tub by itself is not really ready to be used as an enclosure until we do some modifications to it. So I'll take you through that later in the video. Some other things that you're going to want are things to decorate the enclosure with. So I personally use a variety of artificial plants that I can buy from other stores besides pet stores, although I do have some pet store hanging plants. They just tend to get a bit astronomically expensive. I mean, we're talking little hanging plants that don't really take up very much space that are going to be, anywhere from $6 to sometimes over $15 at a pet store. When I can go to Walmart and I can get these artificial plants like this. This is a fern, and it comes with this little planting thing on there so that you can actually stick it. It's meant for arts and crafts, basically. They stick it into foam and pots and they make them look like realistic potted plants. But I'm going to repurpose this to use in an enclosure for a reptile, and I'm going to show you how I do that. A couple more plants that I was able to pick up recently are these nice palm fronds. I hadn't seen these before at Walmart, but I did find them, and they were really cheap. I mean, the fern is $5. I think these were like $1.50 to $1.98 a piece. So just like the tub, there's some prep work that we got to do before we're ready to use these, and I'm going to go ahead and take you through that now. All Alright, so this is the next step in the process when it comes to working with these artificial plants that you buy, just anywhere in any store. So you see I've got my fern, I've got my palm fronds. In my bathtub, this seems to be, for me, the best way to wash these plants. And this is a necessary step when you buy these new plants. You're going to want to wash them in some warm water, basically let them soak, and use a little bit of dish soap in there, and that's completely safe. When we're done, rinse it off very well and dry it off, and there will be no trace of that, and they'll be completely safe to use in your animals' enclosures. But the reason I do this is very important. These plants have a lot of excess dye in them that make them this green color or whatever color they may be when you buy them. So this gives an opportunity to leach out a bunch of that dye, which can be dangerous because a lot of the animals that are going to be in the enclosures that have these plants drink primarily from when you mist the enclosure to increase the humidity. So they're going to be drinking water droplets off of these plants, and you don't want them drinking a whole bunch of that dye. So this is a 100% necessary first step before we can use these plants in a new enclosure. Alright, so when it comes to other cage decor and other functional furniture in the enclosure, I have a couple other supplies that I use to do this, and one of them is sort of commonly used and the other one is pretty commonly used, but it's definitely not something you might think of if you're sort of new to doing this stuff, and that's this right here. Yep, this is a pool noodle, standard pool noodle for people to play with in the pool. And what I use this for, you'll see sort of in detail later in the video. It gets cut down to size so that it fits as basically cross beams in the enclosure, in my tub enclosure. So this gives a really nice place for the geckos to perch and hang on, and it just works really well. It doesn't absorb too much water, but when you clean it off, when you rinse it off with soap and water in between cage cleanings and stuff, it can be easily pretty wrung out to get most of that moisture out of there. And it breaks down a little bit over time from the gecko's claws, but you can just replace it. They're extremely inexpensive, especially this time of year. This is the season where we're starting to get into people going out to the pools and stuff, so you can get these for like $1 a piece. The other thing that I'm going to be using is cork bark. This is the common thing. This is what almost everybody uses in reptile enclosures now. It's really good for building up and having nice places for the geckos to hide in crevices like that. And it's also pretty mold resistant, so if you're misting down your enclosure and it's getting wet, it's not going to grow a whole bunch of mold on it on its own. And it's pretty tough and easy to clean too, so you can literally take this out and clean it just like you would any other cage decor from time to time, and it'll dry completely. So this will have just a little bit of prep work of basically getting rinsed off, sort of like the plants, but not quite as extensively. It's mostly to get some of the excess dirt and stuff off of it before I start using it in the new enclosure. We want to talk about what kind of tools I'm going to be using to do this today. I have a few different things that I'm going to use, and it's really easy and simple. Number one is a hot glue gun, and of course hot glue. I like the Gorilla Glue brand. It seems to hold very well. So I'm going to be using this, and I also use a soldering iron, and you'll see what we'll be using that for as well. Other things include razor blades, or maybe a razor knife, retractable razor knife if you're trying to be more safe. I don't currently have one, so I'm going to be using razor blades. A pair of scissors. And lastly, this is window screen. Just basic window screen that you can buy from pretty much any home improvement place, or Walmart probably even sells it. I got this at Home Depot, and I keep a roll on hand for setting up these new enclosures. I use it on pretty much every size enclosure I do, every size bin, from the baby boxes to the grow outs to the adults. So a couple more tools I'm going to need to accomplish this project are a cordless drill like this, and a couple of different sizes of hole saw bits. So this is a smaller hole saw. This is one that I use so that I can put together, I'll put a hole in something that will fit one of the feeding cups for various geckos that I keep. And then a little bit larger one, which you'll see what I'm going to use this for. This is going to be used to put ventilation in the enclosure. I also have an assortment of drill bits, which I don't always use, but I will probably be using today to make some of the plants that I'm using in this particular setup a little bit more functional. So you'll see that coming up. Alright, so I'm outside currently, and I do live near a pretty busy street, so you're going to hear some traffic. Hopefully it won't be too much. But I'm out here because this is the best place for me to start drilling the holes in this new tub using this cordless drill and this hole saw. I mentioned that we need to modify this tub to make it functional as a gecko enclosure. So we're going to take this and we're going to drill some holes, which we will then fill with screen to make ventilation holes. And I'm also going to use the other tool, the soldering iron, to put some other holes. So you'll see. Let's roll into a little bit of a time lapse, shall we? Alright, so as you can see, I put two 2-inch holes right here in the front of the enclosure. I decided to put them on this part since it's a little bit more flat. I usually like to do at least 2 holes in a tank this size, or a tub this size rather, for ventilation. And then I've got a single hole in the back. So the purpose of this hole is basically just to create airflow. So this will just allow a nice breeze through of air for the animals, so that when we spray to increase the humidity, it will also dry out. So most of these animals do require a delicate balance of humidity and dry, so this is the way we achieve that. Alright, so I got my soldering iron plugged in. So basically I'm going to take it and I'm going to put some holes in all the corners near the top of the tub, just in whatever pattern really strikes my fancy at the time. And this is not only going to provide a little bit of extra ventilation, but it's also going to give us a place for us to hang some of our artificial plant decorations, which you will see coming up. Alright guys, so what I've just done is I have taken that soldering iron and basically just burned right through the plastic and put several holes on all of the top corners of this bin. But the purpose of these holes is dual purpose. It not only provides some more ventilation to the enclosure, but I can also do some hanging of some of my artificial plants using these holes. So, moving on to the next step. Alright guys, so the next step in the process is I usually like to add some sort of ventilation to my lids for my tubs. And so basically how I'm going to do that is I usually use some sort of a template, pretty much whatever I think is the right size that's laying around. For instance, I have this box, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mark off the area of this box using a Sharpie. And honestly, you could use anything and you could do this a little bit more precisely and differently if you wanted to, but this is just a quick and easy way to mark off a place where we're going to remove some of the plastic from this lid. Go ahead and get the front side. Okay, so it's all marked. So now I have an area marked on my tub lid, and I'm going to remove this section of plastic. And the best way that I've found that I can do this is to use a razor blade, and basically I'm just going to make regular cuts along all of these lines, deeper and deeper, until this pretty much gives way. And it seems to be the cleanest, a little bit slower, but the cleanest and easiest way to get this out without having to worry about my lid breaking in any way. I'm sure that there's a way that you could saw through this, but that's not something I like to do. So we're going to go ahead and roll into another time lapse. Alright, so now as you can see, with a little bit of effort, using basically just a razor blade, and I urge you, if you decide to try any of this stuff, do use caution when using a razor blade, especially like this where it's not in a proper box cutting type knife situation. You very easily can cut yourself wide open, so please be careful. But as you can see, I've carefully cut the piece of plastic that I marked off out of the lid. So now this area is open for me to screen in and basically make a little bit more ventilation and allow a little bit more light into the enclosure as well. So move on to the next step now. Okay guys, so the next step is we're going to implement that window screen that I told you about before. So I have a small piece of that window screen here, and I also have a cutting board down to protect my kitchen counter where I'm doing this project. And first I'm going to go ahead and cut this window screen to size for my ventilation holes that I drilled with the hole saw in my tub. So again, I'm going to implement the razor blade, and always use caution. And I found that this little standard roll of packing tape is the perfect circular size for me to be able to cut out nice, neat looking circular pieces of screen to put over those holes. Alright, so as you can see, now I have a nice circular piece of screen to go over at least one of my ventilation holes. Now I just have to cut a couple more, and I also have to cut a piece for the lid as well. So let me go ahead and get to it, and I will see you back in just a second. Alright, so now that I've got my pieces of screen cut, I've got my three ventilation holes for the sides, and I've got my piece of screen for the top. I've got my hot glue gun plugged in, got some glue sticks ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and show you how I attach these screen pieces to the enclosure to provide ventilation for the animal inside. Alright guys, so my plants are done drying, and I have the fern here that I showed you before, and I'd like to just sort of explain how I'm going to use this fern. I'm pretty much going to get rid of this entirely. So basically I go through and I pull all of the individual leaves off of their individual stems. You can see there's been a couple pulled off of this one already. I pull them off, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through those leaves, basically just one of these pipe cleaners. And once all the leaves are on there, they'll basically be stacked up on there, and then I'll have two ends. I can stick these ends through the hole that I put in the tub with a soldering iron, and then I can just sort of twist tie it on there so I have a beautiful hanging plant. And the geckos really love these things. And the reason I chose to use these pipe cleaners as opposed to like a zip tie is because I can get these on and off real easily if I need to clean the whole plant. And yes, they do break down over time, but they're extremely inexpensive and easy to replace. So as opposed to using a zip tie where I would have to cut it off if I wanted to remove the plant, I go with these pipe cleaners. So I'll go ahead and speed things up and show you how I do this. Alright, so now after that process, I have a couple of really nice, pretty full hanging ferns for my new enclosure. So we'll show you how we install these when it comes to the assembly portion. Alright guys, so I'm back out here finishing up this recording. It is a different day. This has taken me a little while to put together, but I have some supplies out here, and we're going to move on to the next part of making this enclosure ready for its new inhabitant. And I've got a few of the pieces of cork bark that I picked up for this build, including this really nice big piece, hollow log. It's going to be awesome. It's even got a little hole in it that was already in there. Here it is right there. And I've got my palm fronds. We're going to go ahead and modify some of these pieces so that they will work a little bit more functionally for what I'm doing. Alright, so now that I have some of the cork bark modified, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my hot glue gun to connect some of that cork bark to the inside of the enclosure so it holds tight in the places that I want it. And I do this with some of my pieces, and then other pieces I leave loose so they can be removed and cleaned periodically, or just make room for general cleaning of the enclosure. So go ahead and do that now. Alright, so I have a little bit of the basic cork bark layout in here now. Didn't go exactly to plan, or at least what I had in mind, but that's okay. I think it's going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what I do with these hanging plants. So we have the holes that we put up here using the soldering iron earlier, and basically just going to stick the pipe cleaners through those holes, pull them through, give them a quick twist, and now I have a hanging plant that I can sort of adjust a little bit. So I'll stick the other one in here and move on to the next step. So I have the pool noodle, and the way this cage turned out, the amount of cork bark that I have in there really doesn't allow for me to do multiple cross beams, but I am going to do one, and I'm going to show you how I do it. So basically I'm just going to stick this guy in here with one end butted up against the inside of the tub, and then I'm just going to make a cut. And I usually cut it a little bit long on purpose, that way I have some room to trim off. So now I have a smaller piece of the pool noodle, and it's definitely a little too long, but that's okay. I just come in and make a small trim. Getting there now. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. This in there, we can adjust the hanging plants a little bit so that they overhang. Create some enclosed spaces for the new animal to feel secure. So that is how I utilize these pool noodles to make climbing branches for my animals. It's very cheap and easy way to make sure you give your animals what you need. So that's it, guys. That's how I go from a regular old storage bin from Walmart to a brand new enclosure for one of my new animals coming in here at Gecko Galaxy. I really hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough on how I do that. And if you did like it, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel for more content like this, and also comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you have any ideas for what I could do differently? Or do you want to see more of this type of stuff? Or did you enjoy it? Are you going to use some of these ideas? Please, I'd love to hear from you guys. Just so you know, I am getting this brand new animal, hopefully Thursday. That is the scheduled delivery day, so we will do an unboxing video. You can follow me down and pick up the animal, and we're going to unbox it right here on YouTube. So again, leave your comments down below. Guess what you think it is. Pretty evident that it's going to be at least in a small group of things based on how I set the enclosure up, but let me know. What do you think I'm getting? Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.